In the pre-dawn hours of February 22, 2014, the world's most elusive drug lord was finally cornered. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, head of the Sinaloa cartel, was captured in a seaside condominium in Mazatlán, Mexico, ending a 13-year manhunt that had humiliated governments and reshaped the global drug trade. The rise of Joaquín Guzmán loomed from the remote mountains of Sinaloa, where a young man nicknamed El Chapo carved out a path through fields of poppy and marijuana, building alliances and exploiting the weak arm of local law enforcement. Over time, he emerged as the leader of the Sinaloa cartel, masterminding an enterprise that moved cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana across borders with unprecedented scale. His name whispered through Mexico and beyond, a fugitive, a legend, a threat. Guzmán had already been behind bars once, arrested in 1993, sent to serve more than 20 years for murder and drug trafficking, only to slip away in 2001, allegedly hidden in a laundry cart, and vanish into the shadows while his empire expanded. The manhunt became national, even international. Governments placed rewards on his head. Informants, wiretaps, wire networks, drone overflights, and tip-offs collided in a relentless effort to pin down the myth. By late 2013, the wheels of intelligence finally started turning in earnest. Investigators began to pick apart the inner workings of Guzmán's network, detaining key lieutenants, tracking his financial flows, and penetrating his security detail. They followed signals, cell phones, convoys. Officials traced movements to the Pacific coast, to Sinaloa's beach resorts, and to properties used as safe houses. The intelligence work grew precise: a phone ping here, a fuel receipt there, a guard talking, a driver stopped. Each clue pointed closer to Guzmán's hideouts. On the night of February 21 into February 22, 2014, a coalition of Mexican Navy commandos, federal agents, and assistants from U.S. counterparts closed in. They converged on a luxury 12-story condominium in the Miramar complex, Mazatlán, an unlikely fortress where Guzmán had taken refuge under cover of his cartel's vast network. Authorities knew he was there, they knew how he moved, and they were ready. In the early hours, the Marines made their move. They hammered on doors, flashed lights, breached entry points. Inside, Guzmán awoke to the sound of footsteps and shouts. His bodyguards scrambled. Gunfire erupted in the dark. It was fast, brutal, and decisive. Guzmán attempted to flee through back halls, but the operation had him boxed in. Amid the smoke and confusion, he was unmasked. The man who had eluded capture for years was now face to face with his captors. He was brought out of the condo in handcuffs, pursued by the attention of media around the world. Tactical units searched the hideout. They found weapons, armor, communications gear, encrypted devices, and stacks of cash. They locked down the building, took control of the scene, and began interrogating. Guzmán remained defiant. His capture sent shockwaves. For authorities, it was a victory. For the cartel, it was a blow. Once in custody, Guzmán was transported to a maximum security facility, stripped of his freedom but still commanding fear and respect. Within hours, Mexico's president publicly declared that the most wanted drug lord had been captured, a moment compared to the downfall of other notorious figures. The arrest of El Chapo marked the end of a chapter and the beginning of another, a story of power, violence, and law enforcement that would continue to unfold. Yet inside those prison walls, Guzmán's world didn't pause. He still attempted to communicate, bribe guards, leverage his cartel's reach. His security detail operated with urgency. The Sinaloa cartel's tentacles remained long and dangerous. The authorities knew that capturing Guzmán was only step one. He remained a symbol, and his network was deeply embedded. In the weeks that followed, investigators interrogated his associates, unlocked phone records, followed money flows, and uncovered tunnels and concealment schemes built for one purpose: to keep Guzmán moving, trading, evading. They mapped the cartel's underground infrastructure, smuggling routes, secret circuits in the mountains, hidden labs, landing strips, and yes, the tunnels beneath cities and borders. They discovered the true breadth of his operation. As evidence piled up, prosecutions loomed. But the most crucial challenge remained: keeping El Chapo behind bars. The prison walls had not broken his spirit. They would not guarantee that he stayed. The cartel was watching, waiting, and capable. And the man they had caught was the same man who had slipped away before. The capture was a moment frozen in time, but the battle was far from over. ChatGPT said inside Altiplano, Mexico's most secure prison, Joaquín Guzmán adapted quickly to the rhythms of confinement. The grey corridors were lined with cameras, motion sensors, and armed guards, yet the man who had once run one of the largest narcotics empires on earth understood how to make systems bend. The government insisted that this time there would be no escape. Officials rotated guards, restricted visitors, and enforced round the clock surveillance. Guzmán was assigned to a small cell, watched every second through a camera mounted high above, his every move recorded. He was permitted an hour of exercise each day in a tiny courtyard enclosed by high concrete walls. He spoke little but observed everything. The quiet served him. It allowed him to plan. Outside those walls, the Sinaloa cartel continued to operate under the direction of his trusted lieutenants. D. Maso Elfipez, known as El Licenciado, had been one of Guzmán's key confidants and played a growing role in organizing logistics, paying off officials, and maintaining the cartel's supply routes. His sons, collectively known as Los Chapitos, assumed partial control, ensuring that shipments to the United States did not stop. Profits flowed, and money moved through a labyrinth of accounts and front companies. To the world, El Chapo was captured. To his men, he was simply away. Over months, small but deliberate preparations unfolded. Construction crews near the prison were registered under false identities. A series of purchases began: tools, ventilation pipes, motorized carts, and GPS devices. Engineers loyal to the cartel acquired architectural blueprints and topographical maps of the area surrounding the prison. What appeared to be legitimate building work in a nearby house was, in fact, the start of one of the most ambitious escape operations in criminal history. A tunnel began to take shape. It extended for more than a kilometer underground, equipped with lighting, ventilation, and a rail system to transport a modified motorcycle mounted on tracks. The tunnel headed straight toward Guzmán's cell. Inside Altiplano, Guzmán's guards noticed nothing unusual. The floor beneath his shower area had been carefully weakened over time with vibrations from below. On the night of July 11, 2015, cameras recorded him entering the shower wearing his standard beige uniform. Moments later, he vanished from view behind a low partition. The seconds stretched. No one realized what was happening until the signal from his ankle bracelet went silent. Security forces scrambled down the corridors, unlocking doors and calling his name. The drain cover lay open, and a hole yawned beneath it, leading into darkness. Down below, Guzmán mounted the waiting motorcycle and sped through the narrow tunnel, air thick with dust and the smell of earth. The rail system carried him beneath the prison perimeter, past markers left by his engineers to guide him. After nearly 30 minutes, he emerged inside the small construction house where his men were waiting. They exchanged his prison uniform for civilian clothes and loaded him into a vehicle that disappeared into the night. By dawn, the most wanted man in Mexico was gone again. News of the escape spread across the world. The government faced international embarrassment. Senior prison officials were suspended or arrested. The United States renewed demands for Guzmán's extradition, arguing that Mexico could no longer contain him. But the damage was done. For months, Guzmán remained invisible. He retreated to the rugged Sierra Madre Mountains, protected by his network of farmers, relatives, and armed men who knew the terrain better than any pursuing force. Hidden between Durango and Sinaloa, he rebuilt his communication system using coded radios and satellite phones. Despite his isolation, Guzmán maintained command. He coordinated drug shipments to Central America, kept in touch with his sons, and tried to smooth tensions with rival factions inside his organization. But the net around him began tightening once again. Mexican and American intelligence agencies had refined their surveillance methods since his last capture. They tracked cell phone signals, monitored messages sent through intermediaries, and planted informants inside his network. The turning point came not through violence, but through communication. Guzmán had begun corresponding with Mexican actress Kate del Castillo, expressing interest in a film about his life. Through her, he reached out to actor Sean Penn, agreeing to an interview for Rolling Stone. The secret meeting was arranged deep inside Sinaloa in late 2015. Guzmán arrived flanked by bodyguards wearing a silk shirt and gold-embroidered belt. Penn recorded hours of conversation while Guzmán spoke about his business, his childhood, and his vision of power. The meeting was meant to remain secret, but every movement left a digital trail. Mexican intelligence traced phones used by Del Castillo's entourage, cross-referencing the data with intercepted communications. Within days, the location of Guzmán's mountain hideout was narrowed down. In early January 2016, Mexican Marines launched an operation in Los Mochis, a coastal city in Sinaloa. Acting on intelligence from U.S. agencies, they surrounded a safe house believed to shelter cartel members. Before dawn on January 8, a team of Marines stormed the property. Inside, gunmen opened fire with automatic rifles and grenades. The battle was fierce, echoing through the narrow streets. 5 cartel members were killed, 1 Marine wounded. Amid the chaos, Guzmán and his chief lieutenant fled through a hidden tunnel that connected the house to the city's drainage system. The tunnel led to a network of sewers stretching for kilometers beneath Los Mochis. Guzmán and his aide crawled through waist, deep water, guided by flashlights, until they surfaced through a drain cover near a highway. They stole a white sedan at gunpoint and sped away, but federal forces had already set up roadblocks. A patrol recognized the vehicle and gave chase. After a brief pursuit, the car was intercepted on the outskirts of the city. Marines pulled the 2 men out, and within minutes, Guzmán was handcuffed once more. He was flown by helicopter back to Mexico City under heavy guard. The images of his recapture flooded global media. The same man who had humiliated his captors twice now sat exhausted, his shirt open, wrists bound. The Mexican president announced the news with satisfaction, declaring that justice had prevailed. This time the government vowed he would not escape again. Guzmán was returned to Altiplano, but under far stricter conditions. His cell was reinforced, sensors were upgraded, and his communications were cut off completely. Every movement required approval from multiple officers. Behind the scenes, negotiations for his extradition resumed. The United States had long sought to try Guzmán on charges of trafficking, money laundering, and murder. Mexico, still recovering from the embarrassment of his escape, agreed. Legal proceedings stretched throughout 2016 as Guzmán's lawyers filed appeals and sought to delay his transfer. Security remained tense. Officials rotated guards constantly to prevent bribery or infiltration. Finally, on January 19, 2017, hours before the inauguration of a new U.S. president, Mexico quietly handed over the prisoner. Guzmán was flown to Long Island, New York, under armed escort, arriving at MacArthur Airport just before sunset. He was taken to the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, a facility designed to hold high-risk inmates. There, he was kept in near total isolation under special administrative measures, meaning no contact with other prisoners and limited communication with his lawyers. Guards monitored him 24 hours a day. His windows were frosted, his exercise yard an empty concrete pit. Guzmán spent his days preparing for trial, reviewing stacks of documents, and maintaining a stoic silence. The federal indictment against him was vast. It included more than a dozen counts spanning drug trafficking, organized crime, firearms violations, and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors from the Eastern District of New York alleged that the Sinaloa cartel had smuggled more than 200 tons of cocaine and other narcotics into the United States, generating billions of dollars in profit. Witnesses included former cartel members, pilots, smugglers, accountants, and even family members who turned state's evidence. Over time, more than a dozen cooperating witnesses built a detailed portrait of Guzmán's empire. The trial began in November 2018 inside a heavily fortified Brooklyn courthouse. Streets were blocked, snipers positioned on rooftops, and every attendee passed through layers of security. Guzmán appeared each day wearing a suit, escorted by U.S. Marshals. Across 3 months, jurors listened to stories of underground tunnels, bribed officials, clandestine airstrips, and violent rivalries. Testimonies described how he used encrypted phones, private jets, and fleets of submarines to transport drugs. They recounted meetings with Colombian suppliers, negotiations with Honduran traffickers, and bribes paid to police and politicians. One witness, Guzmán's former pilot, explained how planes loaded with cocaine landed on remote runways in Mexico, where cartel operatives quickly refueled and dispatched the cargo north. Another described the construction of tunnels under the U.S.-Mexico border, equipped with rails and lighting systems similar to the one that had freed him from Altiplano. Each testimony painted a picture of precision and control, a logistics network that rivaled multinational corporations in complexity. Through it all, Guzmán remained composed. He listened to translators, took notes, and occasionally smiled at his wife, Emma Coronel, who attended the sessions until the court restricted her appearances. Prosecutors presented intercepted phone calls in which Guzmán's voice ordered shipments and negotiated killings. They introduced ledgers showing millions of dollars in transactions. The defense countered that Guzmán was a scapegoat for a vast organization that would continue to operate regardless of who stood trial. After nearly 3 months of testimony and more than 30 witnesses, closing arguments began in February 2019. The jury deliberated for 6 days. On February 12, they returned their verdict guilty on all counts. The decision carried a mandatory life sentence. Weeks later, at sentencing, Guzmán stood in court, his expression firm. Through a translator, he accused the government of corruption and claimed he had been denied a fair trial. The judge listened, then handed down the sentence life in prison plus 30 years. Shortly afterward, Guzmán was transferred to the United States Penitentiary Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, known as ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the country. His cell measured 7 by 12 feet, equipped with a bed, sink, and toilet made of stainless steel. Meals were slid through a slot in the door. He spent 23 hours a day in isolation, allowed 1 hour of exercise in a small outdoor cage. No internet, no phone, no visitors except for lawyers. It was the end of a decades-long pursuit. Yet even behind those walls, Guzmán's name retained power. The Sinaloa cartel adapted, splitting into factions led by his sons and former lieutenants. Violence flared across Mexico as rival groups fought for dominance. His legend, built through years of escape and defiance, continued to circulate in songs, films, and popular culture. Authorities monitored every attempt to contact him, fearing that even a message could reignite chaos. Over the years, his appeals were denied. Reports emerged of his declining health, his isolation weighing heavily. But the story of his capture, escape, recapture, and extradition remained one of the most extraordinary sagas in modern criminal history. A sequence of events that spanned continents, involved armies of agents, and exposed the fragile line between power and pursuit. From the mountains of Sinaloa to the sterile corridors of an American supermax, Joaquín Guzmán's journey traced the rise and fall of a man who once commanded an empire built on fear, loyalty, and the unrelenting reach of the drug trade. The lights in ADX Florence flicker on and off at precise intervals, marking the passing of time in silence. In that silence, the story of El Chapo settles into history. One more chapter written in the long, violent chronicle of the cartels that reshaped a nation and changed the course of a global war that never truly ends.